Shmai, Sitachi, Croeso, Chris, Adoe, what is cracking, ladies, gents, boys, girls, anyone who just happens to be anyone. Today we are talking about Talisman of Death, a fighting fantasy novel that takes place in the world of Orb. Now, originally this book, I believe, was written by Jamie Thompson and Mark Smith, but then when it was republished, I have a feeling that Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson bought the rights. I'm not really sure what happened there, but it is a cracking little book. Now, you might be wondering, when were these books published? You probably weren't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. No, in Puffin, it was published back in '84. Then Wizards published it back in 2006. Now, if you bought this in the Puffin editions, the older editions, you will find that is book number 11. But if you got the Wizard edition, you'll realise that it's book number 24. And that is the order in which I'm doing these videos. Just so you know, you're aware. Now, like I said, this book takes place in the world of Orb. The world of Orb is not connected at all to Titan. In fact, you are brought from Earth through like a dimensional portal into the world of Orb to carry out a very, well, is it a secret mission? You tell everybody. You carry out a mission in order to save the world of Orb. Now, the world of Orb is a very fun little world. It's like a typical fancy little fantasy world. In my opinion, it's very much like Cyrodiil from the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, mixed with Yharnam from Bloodborne. But that's just me. That's just how I felt. But before I get into the story too much, I want to talk about the covers because the covers are very metal. Now, when it comes down to the Puffin cover, the Puffin cover is honestly really, really cool. It's very metal, it reminds me of like the Judas Priest kind of era, like covers. It's just amazing. There's like this Grim Reaper dude on a horse. What's not to love? It's really cool. To be honest, it's probably one of my favourite covers that I've seen. It's just because it's really metal. But how does it compare to the Wizards cover? And that's really it. The Wizards cover is very much the same thing. It's sort of like the similar vein of it. It's quite metal, but it's more like goth metal, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Is there goth metal? I don't know. It is, you got the Grim Reaper dude on the horse. It's very much like the Sleepy Hollow kind of thing with the Headless Horseman. He's pointed down at you. He wants your Talisman of Death. Both covers are very cool. And to be honest, it's a 50-50 on which I prefer the most. Because, guess what? They're both amazing. I'm going to have to say it's a tie this time. They both come first, just because of how cool they are. So, without further ado, let's get into the story. Now, first things first, per usual, we turn the bad boy around, we look at the blurb and it says, "The once peaceful world of Orb is in terrible danger. Dark forces are at work to unleash the awesome might of the evil one, and only you can stop them. Your mission is to destroy the Talisman of Death before the Dark Lord's minions reach you, but beware, time is running out." And that just about summarises the story really, really well, actually. Now, what you find is that you're sort of brought into the world. At the start of the story, you are brought into the world. You find yourself in like a castle. You have like an adventuring party, and you have hordes of goblins and dark elves coming down upon them. They are going to kick them in. They don't survive. But they're like, here's the Talisman of Death, right? I'm going to teleport you out to make sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands. And that's exactly what happens. Then you're thrust into the world of Orb. Now, these adventurers, they are what they are. The priest has a massive mouth. I don't know why. He just looks so ugly. I think it's a drawing style that appears in quite a few books. I think it happens again in the House of Hell, where they just get the mouth really weird. But, art aside, you're thrust into the world of Orb and you make your way to the town where you spend most of the book. And the town is pretty good. Like I said, it's a mix between Cyrodiil from the Elder Scrolls Oblivion and Yharnam from Bloodborne. Very interesting and very fun. I thoroughly enjoyed the town. Now, there is one thing that I didn't enjoy, and this was the thing that made me want to put it down to like maybe a 3-star. I kept on a 4-star because I thought I was being too mean. You spend a lot of time dealing with thieves, and now for me, for some reason, when I read this book when I was younger, I absolutely hated dealing with the thieves. But that sort of stigma stuck around, and I just found it really boring. I don't know why. I used to find the story quite convoluted, quite awkward. I'd get lost, I'd lose the talisman, and I wouldn't be able to get it back. And yeah, I suppose it's the stigma of what I experienced when I was younger, but the book itself is actually quite fun. It is action-packed. You have a lot of interesting characters. You have an old sage that just offers you a place to stay. He gives you advice. He's by and large, he's a lovely guy. You can trust this guy. And at one point, you get your foot caught in like a bear trap, and I thought, wow, that's pretty gnarly. That's pretty metal, and it is. It's pretty cool. I loved it. It's thoroughly awesome. And the reason why I say it draws inspiration from Bloodborne, because obviously it doesn't, because this book was published way before Bloodborne was even conceived, is because there's a lot of spooks that happen to be minions of death. they want the talisman, and they just speed through the town. You have like some amazing stuff. I think you have like a chariot of death where the guy's like a skeleton. It's amazing. He was an encounter that I originally kept bumping into when I read the book when I was younger. I didn't see him on my last playthrough, which was the complete playthrough. So you have a lot of spooks to encounter in the town itself, and they inevitably take the talisman off you, and then the main story then is getting the talisman back and I suppose destroying it. The rule system is very traditional to a fighting fantasy game book. You are basically an adventurer. You have a sword, you have armor, you have whatever. It's very traditional, like I said. You know, it's not like a three-way fighter where you're in a car. It's not like you have like horse stamina because you have a horse. It's literally just you walking around this town trying to get things right, trying to do the best that you can do. Now, I briefly touched upon NPCs and fun little engagements. There is another NPC that I thoroughly enjoyed, and her name was Horcana. She's like this priestess. She's evil from what I can gather, and you fight her, but then she comes back to life. She keeps coming back to life. It doesn't matter what wounds you inflict on her, she keeps coming back, and it's because she's got this cool little ring. You take the ring off her and she just expires. It's really cool. I enjoyed the engagement. She looks like Cher, which I think is why I found it really fun, because she looks so familiar. It is a weird engagement. It is part of the book that I didn't enjoy that most, because you are engaging with the thieves at the same time, but it is what it is. Now I keep touching upon the thieves. Why don't I like the thieves? I don't like the thieves because they didn't go all out with them. They could have gone all out with them, but they chose not to, and you have a really brief encounter which just sort of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. One of the guys tries turning on you, and it's only in like literally like one line of text, so if you're skimming it's really easy to miss. But he tries turning on you, he tries stabbing you, he gets like peppered by crossbow bolts. It's really cool, but then you just jump over and they're like, oh, what happened to our boy? And you're like, yeah, he's a traitor, thanks guys, I'm off. And then you don't see them again. It would have been nice if they were like a consistent pursuer that sort of followed you through the story, which ends with you slaying the last one just about when you're about to finish the book itself. You know, that's sort of, it is sort of like half bothered, I suppose. But on the same hand, I don't know if I want to have to engage with a group of thieves throughout the entire book. Now it feels like I'm soft spoiling far too much of this book, so I'm just going to say the ending's actually pretty good. It's interesting, it's nice, and without spoiling any details, it's different from what I'd expect. It's different from what you'd probably expect by reading the blurb. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not very much, how do I put it? It's a different style of ending from what you'd get with Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. So I think it's time to summarize this video, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I was going to give it a 3 out of 5 purely because of the thieves, but you know, I thought 4 out of 5 is a pretty good score. It's very honest, and that's the thing. The book is actually pretty good. It's a nice little book. It wasn't, I don't believe, written by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. It's written by Jamie Thompson and Mark Smith, like I said, and the story does differ because of that. This story does draw more influences from Lord of the Rings than say your average fighting fantasy novel written by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, and that's one thing I never noticed before picking up this book. You know, someone said that the introduction is very reminiscent to a scene in Lord of the Rings where they're getting swarmed by the dark elves and goblins, and there's another scene towards the end where you have the Talisman of Death and a bunch of wraiths sort of appear, and it's very reminiscent, I believe, to a scene where Frodo just gets hounded by the Wraith Knights. Is that what they're called? I don't know, my Lord of the Rings lore isn't up to scratch. But it's a really fun little book. It's a really fun little adventure. It's one of those ones that tastes different to the other ones, not like you should be eating them. It's a breath of fresh air is what I'm trying to say. It feels different and it's fun. It's a lovely little adventure, and it's 400 references, so what can go wrong? So I gave this book a solid 4 out of 5 stars, and I believe that is very honest. It's a fantastic little book, 400 references, there's a lot to enjoy, and if you can get it from eBay or another second-hand retailer, whether it be online or physical, it's totally worth adding to your collection. It is a safe buy if you enjoy fighting fantasy in general. So without further ado, I suppose it's time to say goodbye, and next Thursday is going to be the Sword of the Samurai. You know, I'd done a double upload this week because I had a week off and I couldn't quite catch up, and I wanted to end the series just before Christmas. So yeah, next week is Sword of the Samurai. I'm hoping to see you there. If I don't, have a lovely day, have a lovely week, have a lovely life. Ta-ra, goodbye.